Hello everyone, I'm Steve, Mark's got the night off tonight, and this is Smokey, Steve, and Mark. Either welcome or welcome back, and happy Tuesday. I hope everyone's well, everyone's safe, look after yourselves, look after people you care about. These are interesting times in which we do live. So today we're going to do, I guess, part 3, I'm going to do part 3 of our series for National Recovery Month and National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. So our first video, we kind of just open the floor, and we're talking about raising awareness. And we solicited from you guys during the first video. There will be some cards flying, maybe not immediately, but during the course of the video, asking questions, asking if you guys had any questions about addiction, recovery, mental health, because people will send us questions from time to time. So we thought, let's all put it together. It's a good month. It's dedicated to that, so we'll do that. So we did a second video with Mark and I where he did some Q&A and I did one or two about addiction, about different ways people get well, about scenarios within families, and we tried to share our humble opinions with that. So now we're going to talk about mental health, and we're going to talk about suicide awareness and prevention. Now, before going too much further, there's going to be a few things I want to touch on. One, this is a very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive topic. People have certain motives in searching out videos that have the word suicide in them. You know yours. So, just in case, I'm going to put in the notes here the crisis text line, text home to 741-741 to speak to a counselor anonymously, or the National Suicide Crisis Hotline will be in the description, just in case any of us needs them. I keep the suicide hotline on speed dial because life is tough, okay? No shame in my game. So we have that there. I don't really do trigger warnings, but I mean, you know, use your judgment. So, also, language. The language around mental health changes constantly. A person who receives mental health services, and even that sounds weird, can be called a client, a consumer, a patient, an individual. Why not just call me by name? It changes all the time too. As such has been the language around suicide. Committed suicide was pretty much the way, and pretty much is the way I think most people still describe it. It changes within the mental health community for the sake of being person-centered and giving dignity to the individual. So it went from that to completed suicide. Most recently, I think it's died by suicide, and it will probably change again. The best I can do as a professional of sorts is to just keep up with the current language. But not splitting hairs on this. If you're brave enough to approach the topic, don't think that you should get shouted down if you say the wrong word. I wouldn't shout you down. Anyway, so there's that part. And then 3, who the hell am I, or Mark, to talk about suicide awareness, mental health, anything at all? Well, I have some personal experience. First, I am a person with a mental health diagnosis. I have bipolar 1. I was diagnosed in 2009. What was bipolar 2 then? Then I had a manic break, and then lo and behold, I climbed the ladder. So I have that going on. And I've had multiple suicide attempts to go with that when I wasn't, when treatment wasn't going well. I was having a hard time adjusting to meds. I used to drink like a fish, so yeah, obviously it's hard to get a good play of meds with that. So I have experience with attempting suicide myself. I would say 3 times, seriously, and then 2 times, probably closer to attention seeking. And I also have experience as a person who has been friends with people who've died by suicide suddenly, suicide and overdose, suicide by overdose. So I've been on the receiving end of that. And also I work at a mental health agency. So not as part of my regular work, but as needed, as assigned. I've done a little bit of education on suicide, very little. I've done working with people who've lost family members to suicide. That's happened more often. And every so often, on a Friday afternoon at 3, when you think you're leaving the office early, somebody calls who really, really needs to talk. And it's a situation, something like that. So I have some professional experience with it too. So that's my qualification or disqualification. So what we did receive were some questions, Q&A. And I'm going to go through some of these. They were left underneath the original YouTube video. Again, some are mental health, some are suicide related. I'm sharing my experience primarily as a person who's been on the receiving end of being what they'll call suicide survivors. So if you're the person who's been left behind, whether you're a family, anyone who's feeling the loss of it, you know, you're a suicide survivor, that's what they call it. I guess there's a group of attempt survivors. I think I'd fall into that as well. So some of the questions were from folks in those situations. And again, some were from YouTube and some were via message. So we're just going to read through them, take it nice and easy breezy, and have a light kind of discussion about this. But the point is, we can have a discussion about this. We don't need to go whisper about this in the kitchen at Thanksgiving, because whisper, whisper. We don't need a megaphone, but we can have open, decent, honest, not pearl clutching, nail biting discussions about a topic that's taboo. Because if this has happened to someone in their family, are they just going to be silent about this person for the rest of their life, or are they going to find a way, around it? A way to still celebrate the person, a way to cope with their losses, a way to make sense of it. It's very challenging if a person has been lost to suicide. So we'll start with the first one we received via message from a lovely woman who is a viewer. And it's, I'm going to have to switch a few things around because I have it in chunks and they're out of order. But I'll read this off and we'll see what we have. So this is from a woman, and she's talking. She's a female viewer talking about her husband and a situation that one of his friends is in. So I'll swap out a few names here. Jeff's golf partner's name is Joe. He just got a text from Joe saying that his next door neighbor, who Joe and his wife are very close with, their next door neighbor's son committed suicide last night. I guess Joe and his wife Shelly have been over at the neighbor's house all night, sitting up with them and just being there for them. They left this morning to pick up their other son at the state university. Do you think, Steve, maybe you could talk a little about what to do in Jeff's position? What would you do? How would they help their friend, a close friend of the affected family? Maybe a way we could help, somewhere we could help them to help themselves or help their family, as well as help the boy's family. These things can get so unfortunate. There's more to this. God, this is awful. But from what I was told, the boy had been suffering for the past year and would not seek help. Does Steve have any advice for someone who has a family member suffering with obvious mental illness or depression who does not want to seek help? Is there anything you can do? I guess he dropped out of college last year. I'm not sure how old he is, but I would assume late teens, early 20s. If you guys do have a video or suggestions for this type of weird situation, where would we sort of removed from it, where we're sort of removed from it but still feel like we're doing the right thing, that would be great. I know it is still Mental Health Awareness Month and Suicide Prevention Month. I think there's more. These, when I say these situations, there's so many. Death sucks, okay? Like, that's everybody's, but all right. So basically, the issue is that they're trying to provide support for a friend who is supporting another person who's lost a younger family member to suicide. And what can they do? I think the biggest issue that people have, from my experience, is when people don't know what to say or what to do in a situation like this, they do nothing because they don't want to do the wrong thing. And that's courteous to not want to do the wrong thing. You don't want to upset somebody in a situation. And that's true when anybody passes away. There's stigma that goes around when a person dies by suicide. People are reluctant to mention the person's name when talking to the family. It's not a conscious thing I think people do, but I think they feel like they leave it out. Certainly talking about the circumstances around it are not, right there. And I'm not talking necessarily about the day of the funeral or the viewing, if there is a funeral or a viewing. That's not always the case either. I've had a number of friends who have passed away by suicide or overdose, and given that and the broken relationships that they had with their family leading up to it, there may have been no service at all. Private interment at the convenience of the family was how it was kind of summed up. They didn't want any attention drawn to the person's death. Hopefully not their life, but their death. So it's challenging. One of the things I think that people can do to support family members, or to support survivors, because if it's, by degrees of separation, is to do things we would do for someone else who was going through a hard time with the loss of a family member. Saying things that are honest, but not Pollyanna. Saying, I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. You do not know exactly how I feel. Unless, perhaps, you are in the same situation and you've lost a family member or a child to suicide. If you have, that's a special connection. That's what's called in the communities peer support. This is someone who has shared life experience that you have as well, and you can talk about it together. They may be a little further down the road than you. They may be 1 year out from their tragedy. They may be 5 years out and have a different perspective at this point. People change, people grow. So that's an opportunity. But for me to say to a parent, I know exactly how you feel, even though I have experience with suicide attempts and losing friends, that would still be really disingenuous to say because I'm not a parent. I don't know what it would be like to lose a child. Something better might be to say, I don't know what to say. But I wanted you to know that I'm here if you have anything to say or you want to talk. Point blank, period. There is, I think, absolutely nothing wrong with letting the person know you have no idea what to do, you have no idea what to say, but you want to make yourself available to them if they need it. For talking, for speaking, for listening, for going for a walk with them. They may want to cry and have someone there, but not want to talk about it. Just have someone in the room. There's a lot of ways we can be there for people. If a person's going through a hard time after the death of a loved one, one of the first things I remember that would happen in our family, like when my grandparents died, so much effing food would show up at the house. Some things aren't so different. Things you can do to take the burden off any other friend or family member who's going through a hard time. And saying to someone, I'm here if you need anything, and you say that to a person who's grieving, it's a generous thing to say because you're offering yourself to that person. The twist of it, though, is sometimes that person may be so overwhelmed with feeling like they need help with everything that they freeze and ask for help with nothing. Sometimes something a little concrete, like maybe it's after the smoke clears and it's been a few weeks and it's like, hey, I got to go to the grocery store this afternoon. Do you need me to pick up a couple things for you? Or, you know what, I was making lasagna and I had so much I made too. Do you guys need one? I could bring it over for dinner. Something concrete to offer to help, just to take one thing off the person's checklist of things they need to do. Grief comes in 1,000 different ways. There's the stages of grieving. We've all seen them. You can Google them. It's been my experience. They don't go in order, and that you can switch back and forth all over the place, all the time. My own experience with grieving with a friend who's passed away from suicide. The first person I blamed was me, because I'm self-centered. So I thought it was my fault. I thought I could have kept him alive if I had talked to him on the phone. We had fallen out of touch by phone for about 6 months, and I was trying to remember who made the last phone call. Was it me or him? Because if it was me and he didn't answer, then I don't feel that guilty. And then all the ridiculous, petty... he passed away, and I was trying to decide if it was my fault or his. It was my fault. It wasn't... He was ill. He was very ill for a very long time. He was very ill before I had met him, too. And I was fortunate to have had the chance to spend time with him. He was a very integral part of my life, at a very big turning point in my life. And I was very fortunate to have known him. But, sorry, just needed a moment. What I would think about was, if only I had called. If only I had just called. What would it have taken to have called just once a week? And I had told my friend, Willie, who I've mentioned in the past, he was my most recent, closest loss of a couple. And I was mad. Then I was mad. Then I was mad at him, because I thought we were supposed to be the two most unlikely ones who were supposed to make it. We were the ones who were supposed to live, and now it's just me. I was pissed. I was very pissed off at him. I was mad for a while. And then I was looking for my own closure, and I couldn't make any sense of it. I thought, well, maybe I'll reach out to his mom, but I don't know. I had never met his mother. He hadn't spoken much about her. She was on Facebook, and I felt weird randomly sending her a message saying I knew your son, because I didn't know what kind of relationship they had. And she just lost her son. So who's it going to make feel better if I reach out to her? Me or her? And whose feelings probably matter more at the moment, hers or mine? I don't know. It's a tough call to make. I decided to swallow it and say nothing about it, and just grieve differently. I spoke to a few of the professionals that I talked to about it. I didn't seek out a professional specifically for it, but that's only because I see so many. So I just ran it past a couple that I see anyway. So I was pissed. I was very pissed off at first, when he passed away. And I couldn't make sense of it. It wasn't a surprise, but just because it wasn't a surprise doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And then I thought, how could I have intervened? What could I have done? And he was seeking help, too. The issue of trying to find help for someone who doesn't want to get help is a challenging one. As is mentioned in this scenario, there was a young person who dropped out of college, who had problems for a while, who wasn't interested in seeking help. I was not interested in seeking help. I was very close to having dropped out of college. I was towing the line for a long time. I took extra semesters because I failed and withdrew from classes, and I was drinking, and I was nuts, and, you know, all that stuff. So I think a lot of people who deal with grief of any kind, or even when someone dies, looks back and says, why? Like, what could I have done? What could I have said? Or take it really hard if there was what they consider to be unfinished business. If there was unresolved turmoil, if there was unresolved feelings, unsaid things, or questions. Why didn't they call me? Why didn't they tell me? If they were suicidal, why didn't they let me know? I would have been there in a minute. I would have said something. Some questions will probably go unanswered. They may never, like people say, I wish they had left a note. You know, no one wants to find a suicide note, but then there's some people who don't find one that would beg for one because they just want to know what was going through the person's head. And down the road, some people can make their own peace and make peace with the fact that some things they're just not going to understand about this, and then make peace with the memories they have of the person. And some people can do that in a short amount of time, and other people still are torn about it 40 years later. You know, we're individuals. You know, we all grieve a little bit differently in that way. So if I was kind of a little bit far removed and looking to support an individual in that way, I would say just to make myself available. If I'm mentally up to it, make myself available to those folks. If there's a wake or a funeral, go. As if any other person who was a friend of a friend, or a friend who had a child who died suddenly. 20-year-olds don't usually die suddenly. The top 3 leading causes of death for 18 to 24-year-olds, I think it's accidents, suicide. I think 3 is homicide. You know, unnatural deaths, you know, aren't that common in that age group. So showing up for that, being there for any sort of after events, letting the people know if they want to talk that suicide is not a taboo topic for you, that you're, in whatever way that spills out, whether it's a smile, whether it's not flinching when they say a certain word, so whether it's not lowering your tone so you know other people don't hear that you're talking about the way he died. Not that you need to wear a big t-shirt to a service and hold a banner, but using positive sort of language, reassuring the person that I'm a safe person to talk to. You can talk to me about being upset about this person's suicide, and I'm not going to judge you for it, and I'm not going to make you feel like you shouldn't talk about it. And that's it. People need someone they can talk to where they're not going to feel judged. Professional help can be helpful at this point, though, too. Not everybody has someone they feel comfortable in their real life talking to. They want someone a little more anonymous, hence that way, talking to a professional. Also, it's not uncommon for family members or suicide survivors to have an increase in suicidal thoughts after the death of another family member by suicide, because of the whole kind of what's the point, what's it worth, what's life worth living now kind of thing. These things can snowball on each other too. So things other people can do, again, same thing you would do if another person died an unexpected death in a family. Send a lasagna, send a card, offer to be there for them, take out their dry cleaning, maybe mow their lawn. If you want to catch the back 9, I'm taking the afternoon off. Something a little bit normal, maybe to bring to life something a little stable as time goes on. When the shock wears off, if shock's going on, it's going to look very different, especially with mental health issues. Sometimes families after the fact rage against the machine, as it were, looking to lay blame in every single direction against the mental health system, the county mental health authority, the drug and alcohol authority, SAMHSA, OMS, like every alphabet soup you can think of, because their child, they feel like, was left through the cracks and died and didn't have enough resources. In this situation where the young adult didn't want assistance, apparently, I live in Pennsylvania. I think most of the states are like this, but I don't know. If it's a drug and alcohol issue, we don't have court-ordered inpatient drug and alcohol treatment in the state of Pennsylvania. You cannot be forced to, I mean, you can be court-ordered to go and then have to stay in jail if you choose not to, but they can't put you in a rehab, lock you there, and tell you can't leave. Now, that can be done on mental health grounds. They call it a 5150, I think, in California. It's a 302 in Pennsylvania. There's different, again, numbers that go around. It's like alphabet soup, all this stuff. If a person is unsafe, if they're a danger to themselves or somebody else, or left to their own devices for 30 days would be otherwise dead, they can be put involuntarily into a community hospital for evaluation. Usually it's then extended over a period of time. You know, in PA it's like up to 5 days, and then it's up to 20, then up to 90, and then eventually you're talking state hospital stays of up to a year, possibly. But people can't be forced to do it. People can't, there's very specific criteria for a person to be locked up against their will if they haven't committed a crime. And there should be really strong criteria for that. This is America. It should be hard to lock somebody up if they haven't committed a crime, even if it is for their own safety. It's a tough one. It's a very tough one to do. Family members can try to compel a person to get treatment. I've seen family members do ultimatums, a la the recovery video we talked about last time with drug and alcohol. But again, every family is so different, and situations can be so volatile. You know, it's so individual, which almost feels like not giving an answer at all. But I hope I'm giving you a little bit of some potpourri as to what things maybe could or couldn't be helpful. Be there as any other friend could be. Offer yourself as a person who is not tainted with the stigma of talking about suicide, that you can be that friend who won't wince, won't squint, and won't try to compare your trauma to theirs. Oh, I know what it's like to lose I know what that kind of trauma is like. I had a flat tire last week. Don't do it. Don't. And if you're not up to being there, don't promise anything you can't do either. If it's too tough for you because it's too close to home for you, don't put yourself in that position. That doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you a good person, actually, because it means that you're not taking on something you can't do, and you won't disappoint them later or put burden on yourself. So that's where I have for the first one. Let's see. We had some other ones on the YouTube page. I hope I made some sense there. Every situation usually has about 300 or so moving parts. And it's difficult for, I think, a lot of folks to want to talk about the topic of suicide, self-injury, anything like that, particularly because, again, you don't want to say the wrong thing, because I think people feel like saying the wrong thing is what's going to cause a person to go over the edge. If you're talking to a person who is suicidal, it's going to cause them to go over the edge. Or if you say something to a family member or a suicide survivor, that you're going to say the wrong thing, so you say nothing at all. We're better to just trip over our words with a good conscience and make some mistakes than we are to say nothing. If you're worried about saying the wrong thing, but your heart's in the right place, it's okay to stumble. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I want to help. You know, you're better off to be that bumbling, heartfelt mess than to try to say just the right thing, and since you can't, say nothing. So next question we had. Hey guys, really appreciate the content in this one. I do have a question about suicide. Does the urge to commit suicide completely go away, or do you find yourself still thinking about it? And if yes, what method do you use to get rid of that thought? Do I still get the urge to commit suicide, or do I find myself thinking about it? I don't get the urge to. It's not something that happens frequently. I would say I hit a close breaking point. I did my video about being in the psych hospital earlier this year. I think it was February. It was just at the end of February, and I'd gotten pretty close then to the efforts, to like, what the hell's the point? What's the difference? No one's gonna miss me if I'm gone anyway, and it's just too much work. So I remember being at that point, but I hadn't been there for the previous, I would say, 8 years. You know, it had been a very long time. Had I thought about it? Yes. I think about it often when I, well, talk about it, because it's in my mind. I don't want to forget about those experiences. I don't want to bathe in them, you know, but I don't want to forget about those, because honestly, in my own life, the closest calls I've had with death have been manifestations of untreated mental illness, pretty much. I haven't had any like organic health problems yet, knock on wood, that were related to anything other than the fact that I haven't taken good care of myself because mentally I wasn't well enough to do it, and whether that has to do with the drinking or anything else. Passing thoughts about it, yes. They come, they go. The difference with being in recovery and having kind of, and by the way, recovery is like a state of mind. It's not a, and now I'm in recovery thing. Recovery is like, I measure being in recovery when you're talking about mental health. It's an orientation towards effort. You know, it's not, I feel better now. It's, I acknowledge that I feel like crap, and I'm going to put my efforts towards feeling better. I'll look at the little successes. I might still bitch about the lousy ones, but I'm moving in a better direction. That's recovery. You don't have to smile to be in recovery. A lot of days I don't. It's okay. Thinking about suicide daily. I have a friend, a good friend. We're on a committee together. And he deals with a lot of serious psychiatric symptoms, the kind that many people have trouble managing without medication or without being in a closed facility. And he shared with me that he has suicidal thoughts every day. And he does a lot of community work, a lot of personal medicine. He stays very busy. But as he explained it to me, staying busy didn't mean outrunning the thoughts exactly. It just meant that he was trying to keep himself occupied and kind of worthy feeling. So he would get up and he would go to one community meeting about the transportation services for people with mental health concerns in the county, and then he would go to a suicide prevention meeting like that I would be at for work. He'd be there as a community member, and he was involved in the local NAMI. So he found ways to keep himself pretty active that way. That's his reality now. Maybe his reality will change. Maybe mine will change and I'll have them every day. Things are very fluid in that way. If it was more predictable, I don't think I would have been so derailed. So some people, I think, I mean, from what he's expressed to me, yes, it can be a daily thing. He also hears voices every day, he relayed to me, that tell him to hurt himself. So he doesn't manage it with medication. He doesn't. And I admire his... Medication's not cowardly. I admire his bravery in doing something so outside the box of what's normally prescribed as the evidence-based treatments, and taking care of himself doing it, because it looks like it's a lot more work than just taking a pill. For me to get rid of a thought, if I'm having a rough morning and maybe a passing thought goes by and maybe it catches and it won't go away right away, is usually to try to do something a little bit useful for somebody else. Suicidal thoughts for me are very self-centered. I'm not going on the old BS line about suicide being a selfish act, because that makes nobody feel better. All you're going to do is tell a family member that their family member was selfish. So no, I don't go with that. But I do become a little more focused on myself when I'm thinking about how am I feeling, how am I doing, boy, I feel awful, bone, I feel like this, things are so unfair to me. If I start getting my attention in another direction early, and it's usually towards somebody else, it helps me a little bit. It's a little bit easier for me to get out of my own thinking. When I was in a 12-step program, that was easy, because they're always trying to make you do shit. And it works, and it helps in that way. Now, I don't participate in a program like that anymore. Vis-a-vis my work, albeit I'm paid, I have opportunities all day, most days of the week, to help people. They call, they need something, I have some resources, I connect it for them, and I help. If I didn't work in human services, I'd probably have to volunteer or something. My orientation's when I'm sick to no one has bigger problems than me, and then I start to act like that and start to get very hyped on that. snowballs on itself. So I got to get out of my head really fast if I'm starting to feel unsafe in that sort of way. And if it keeps going and keeps going, it can't be my secret. Somebody else has to know. I don't have to tell everybody. I don't have to post a really vague thing on Facebook, and try to invite everybody to come ask me what's wrong. I don't have to tell anyone I know. I could do a crisis text line or something like that. I do believe it's good for every one of us to have one friend, whether it's online, in a family, your chosen family, your biological family, real life, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, who you can tell everything to and who will call you on your bullshit and still love you. You can find plenty of people on YouTube that will call you on your bullshit. But there's a difference between that and someone who will do it in a loving, compassionate way and let you know, I care about you, but you're not making sense right now. This isn't, I'm worried for you. I think that's an important thing to have, to hold up with accountability. So those are my own coping skills to get the thoughts to go away. And for my friend who has them every single day, he keeps busy with activities that seem to be in service of other people. For my own, I find medication to be helpful. It's not a path he chooses, but it's one that I do. But even for myself, I would say medication is probably half of what I do to try to stay well. If all I ever did was take my meds, I could probably stay out of the hospital most of the time. But I don't think I'd have much of a functioning life as far as working or driving a car, having a relationship. I don't think I'd have the wherewithal to do that. So, all right, what do we have next? Seeing as you both work in the field, Mark's like drug and alcohol when I'm the mental health side. A little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, right? Have you seen an increase in people seeking help in the recent years? Is it still quite stigmatized in the States? I'm Canadian and things have come a long way in the past 5 years, but mostly with anxiety awareness. People still get uncomfortable when I mention my depression. I don't know about awareness in the US getting better. Certainly celebrities have been more open about it. And how can I put this? Certain diagnoses sometimes become trendy. Bipolar became popular for a while. And sometimes celebrities will disclose that they have a mental health diagnosis and they stand up and they're an example of someone who's successful and overcame their demons and da-da-da. And different examples are inspirational and others are cringeworthy. I'm thinking of someone like Demi Lovato, who was pretty open about having her issues, overcoming them, then having a setback, trying to get it back together, and re-emerging again. That looks to me a little more like my story. You pull it together, you've come a long way, baby, and then kaboom, start over. You fall to pieces, you pick up the pieces, and you move on. For a lot of us who deal with mental health issues or drug and alcohol, that's the nature of the game. You build a nice life, something happens, whether you caused it yourself or not, and you can't always just pick up where you left off either. You gotta start back a couple steps and keep it moving. But then you have other figures who will use their diagnosis as an explanation for all unattractive behavior, all undesirable behavior. Well, I can't help it, I'm bipolar. Well, I can't help it, I have depression. You don't understand. I have binge eating disorder. And those kind of things. So, is there stigma about getting help in the US? Yes, I think there is. Is there stigma about depression? Not that people have it, but that it's debilitating. I think there's a different, if someone says I have depression, a lot of times people say, oh, everybody's depressed. And in this in this time and space on September 22nd, 2020, yeah, I think a lot of people are depressed. And they're probably anxious too. All of a sudden I'm seeing ads on TV for medication prescribed for schizophrenia. I'm like, is it that common now that we're handing out medication for a diagnosis that 0.3 to 0.9% of the population have? That we're putting on ads on primetime? But at any rate, so I think there is still some stigma. There's stigma with drug and alcohol treatment, definitely, and there's still some with mental health. The best thing that any of us could do to bust stigma is to be our frank, open selves. You know, I don't walk around with a sign on my head that says bipolar suicide survivor. I have a couple shirts that say I'm not crazy. But they're all meant to be in jest. Because like with everything else, with my own recovery, I try not to take myself so damn seriously. You know, you can make jokes without making a joke out of yourself. It's a little bit different. My recovery is worthy of its respect, but I don't need, you know, don't be such a stick up your ass, you know. Relax into it if you can. So as far as paying for drug and alcohol treatment and mental health treatment in the insurance systems, yeah, there's stigma. They're not treated the same way. They're not covered the same way. They're not paid for the same way. As soon as you stop shaking, they'll drop your insurance sometimes and discharge you from a rehab. I was discharged from the psych unit a day early because of insufficient coverage. They told me I was doing better. I get home and I find out that my insurance stopped paying the day before. And I was at a hospital in network 2 minutes from my house. So there's room to grow. There's room to grow as far as stigma. Yeah. What else we got here? Okay. A medication question. Again, I am not a pharmacist. I know about the meds I took and how they affected me. That's my only qualification here. So I have a question about meds. I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression, and my family doctor has prescribed an anti-anxiety and depression med in one thing. I think she said if there is such a thing. I took it for a month, but I had to stop it because it was really making me feel terrible, much worse than without it. I went back to my doctor and told her this, and what did she do? Increase the dosage, because I told her I have a hard time sleeping as well. So she's like, well, take it before bed at the higher dose, and we'll see. Honestly, I haven't taken any of it since I'm not really planning on it. I hate not doing what doctor says, but that med was not agreeing with me. Do you think I'm wrong, or should I take whatever the doctor gives me, or if it doesn't feel right, get a second opinion? Wow. Okay. Yeah, I would say a second opinion isn't a bad thing to get, honestly. Meds are very specific. What could help me could kill you. You know, I've known people who've taken meds that have been absolutely life-saving, and in one situation it saved the person's life. Mentally, it brought them back from years of not being in touch with the reality, our agreed-upon version of reality. And other people who it dropped their white count so low that they went into organ failure and almost died. And that's the same drug for two people with the same diagnosis. So ask each of them their experience and you'll hear something different. So it's kind of hard to say. I had an experience of talking to a doctor and felt like I wasn't being heard. I said a medication was having a difficult time with me and I wasn't feeling well, and they doubled it. And I got worse, much worse, and ended up having all sorts of symptoms, and about 6 months later ended up really crashing and burning very hard. If I was going to go off a medication that I was being prescribed by a doctor, and I didn't like the medication, but I had been taking it, it's any of our prerogatives to manage our healthcare any way we want. If it were me, I would probably try to tell the doctor I didn't want to take it anymore and ask if we could work on tapering off of it. Drugs are drugs are drugs, prescription or otherwise. They're mind-altering. And stopping them cold turkey can be very unpleasant. And if it's not your choice to stay on the medication, I think that's your choice. You know, our bodies are choices. At the same time, if you can avoid unpleasant consequences in making that choice to come off of it by working with that doctor, then I think that's good. If the doctor isn't interested in doing that with you, then getting a second opinion on whether or not the med is good. And if that doctor might work with you to try another med and then taper you off that. I know the doctors say tapers aren't necessary. If any of you who are watching, and I'm guessing some of you have, are on psych medications, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety, everything, you know that even though there's nothing on the box about it, usually, that there is a withdrawal from almost all of them. And we have our own language for the side effects that come with all of them either, you know. So I would say use your judgment. Look out for your medical care and your mental health care, all of it together first. And don't feel bad. Doctors are paid by us. They're not volunteers, and they're not kings. You know, doctors go to school for a long time, and we depend on them to be professional and to have knowledge we don't. That's the reason why they're supposed to be paid so much goddamn more than we do. But if you feel not heard and dismissed by someone you're paying $150 an hour, leave. Leave. Okay? I think that's my suggestion. But if you recognize also that you still need psychiatric care, don't do yourself a disservice by going without treatment. If you think you need help and you're just not getting the right kind of help, seek it elsewhere too. Okay? That would be my guess. Yeah, that would be my guess. If you're going to play with meds, talk to your doctor and see if they'll work with you on getting off of them first, if that's what you want to do. And if they won't, seek out other help. And congratulations on looking after your mental health, even though it's obviously a messy cluster F with your provider at the moment. I know, it's hard, I know. So, this has been a rather hefty discussion, rather emotional discussion. I'm even afraid of saying the wrong thing myself, so I was having a hard time closing out. But I wanted to thank you all for coming today and just listening to a little bit of feedback, answering some questions. Certainly if you have any more, you can either leave them in the comments and we'll do like another Q&A video at another point. Or you can send us in an email and I'll answer them going forward. I can't predict answering them all today or tonight, but if you have any specific ones that I could try to help with. Again, my experiences as a consumer, as a family member, and a little bit with the folks I work with. And most of my experiences that I've shared here are just based on that. So again, wrapping up, we're coming into the end of Recovery Month and Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. And it's just something to keep in mind. For a lot of us, every month is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, just because of the nature of, the mental health concerns we have in the life we live. So it's good. I think it's a good thing to bring these topics up. I think it's good to take the taboo out of them. I think it's good to let it be an open discussion. I think sometimes people will, I don't know, they're afraid. I mean, they're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. It's like when people are afraid to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Because they're afraid it'll put the idea in the person's head. It doesn't. It gives them an opportunity to say yes. It gives them that opportunity for it to come out of their mouth and to start a discussion and to hopefully maybe get some help in that situation. When you don't know what to say and you say nothing, you don't know what the person might say back. So talk to each other. I think communication is key. Absolutely key when it comes to all this kind of stuff. Honest, non-judgmental communication and listening. Listening. Especially for people who are grieving, listening. So that's all I have for today. Thank you all for watching. Please do subscribe. Hit the like button and the bell on your way out so you get the alerts. You can follow Mark and I on Facebook at SmokeySteveAndMarc, or on Instagram at SmokeySteveAndMarc, or on Facebook, our handle is at SmokeySteveA. Our email address and our contact info is all listed down below. Thank you again, and I will catch up with all of you tomorrow. So will Mark. I don't know what we're doing, but it's going to be good. Thanks for watching. Bye.